Hello everyone and welcome to another very nice game that was played yesterday in the Speed Chess Championship. The other matchup, Nodirbek Abdusattorov versus Nepomniachtchi, and it was a really close match, unlike Magnus versus Tuan Minh Le. Where Nodirbek took the lead in the 5+1 section. It would be best if I just show you. So Nodirbek won the 5+1 section with a score of 5-2. Then Nepo retaliated in the 3+1 section with a score of 4-2, and then Nepo also won the bullet, the 1+1 section, with a score of 4-3, tying the match. And then they went into tiebreaks where 4 games were played. And Nodirbek won the first game of the tiebreaks, but then Nepo won 3 in a row. And this is the game that I want to show you, the one where Nepo equalized and then started winning in the tiebreaks. And you're not gonna believe that this is a bullet game. Okay, as I always say, these are super grandmasters. To them, 1+1 I don't consider bullet, because they play better in 1+1 than I would play in a classical game. So by the time I'm done showing you this game, you're even gonna forget that you're watching a bullet game. So let's check it out. Nodirbek with white opens with pawn to e4. Jan replies with pawn to c5. He goes for the Sicilian defense. Knight f3, d6, and pawn to d4. We have captures, knight f6, knight to c3, and a6. Knight of Sicilian is on the board, and Nodirbek challenges it with bishop to e3, the Byrne or the English attack. We have pawn to e5, challenging the knight. This is the top line. Knight to f3 and bishop to e7. We have bishop to c4, bishop to e6, countering the bishop, and bishop to b3. Both players castles, and now knight to c6 is a standard move here. Nepo goes for queen to c8, and this is already a very, very rare move. Only a handful of queen to c8 in the database, and there are some games where knight to g5 was played. Also, knight to d5 is a known move. There are some games with queen to e2, but knight to h4 has never been played, and it is now, as of move 11, that we have a completely new game and where our journey really begins. And as you can see, there's still, or rather, you can't see anything because I haven't included the clock times, so sorry about that, but they are still above the 1 minute mark. So they're not really spending any time here. They're just blitzing out moves or bulleting out moves. Let me just include the clock times. There we go. So over a minute for both of them. Knight h4, we have knight to c6 by Nepo, and knight to f5. And this already shows us what kind of a game is going to be. Nodirbek is sacrificing a pawn for the long-term advantage of having a bishop pair and a potential knight on d5. Of course, Nepo will trade it, so it's basically a pawn for a bishop pair. Okay, bishop captures, pawn captures, queen captures, and knight to d5. Now, the knight is too dangerous to just remain there. Maybe you could do it if it wasn't a bullet game, but in bullet, not really. Knight captures on d5, queen captures, and now rook a to d8. So, okay, Nodirbek has the bishop pair, Nepo has the long-term weakness, that is the d6 pawn. But you always have that. I mean, if you play the Knight of Sicilian, and at some point Nepo is hoping to get the rooks doubled on the d file and execute pawn to d5. If that happens, you know that black is doing very well, because you know what we always say about the d5 being pushed in a Sicilian. c3, preparing to bring the bishop to c2 once the square is sufficiently defended. We have bishop to g5, and as Nodirbek sacrificed a pawn for the bishop pair, of course he will prefer the bishops remain on the board. Bishop b6 attacks the rook, rook to d7, and now rook a to d1. We have bishop to d8. Nepo again offers a trade of bishops, bishop back to e3, and again bishop to g5 offering a trade. Bishop back to b6, bishop to d8, and now Nodirbek not really interested in repeating moves and handing over the white pieces to Nepo, plays bishop to c5. Of course, now you cannot capture as the rook would hang, you would win the exchange, so knight to e7, kicking away the queen, and now queen to d2, and this all works out very well in Nepo's long-term plan of executing pawn to d5. You have to first remove the blockader, which was the queen in this case, and now you have to somehow figure out how to double up rooks here and push that pawn to d5. So bishop to c7 first, freeing up the d8 square for the rook. We have bishop back to a3. And now rook f to d8. Now the d7 rook is sufficiently defended, so of course the bishop cannot remain on c5. We have pawn to c4, stopping d5, and bishop to b6, putting pressure on that f2 pawn. Bishop to c2, kicking away Nepo's queen. We have queen to e6 and pawn to b3, shifting the bishop over to b2. Like I said, you're down a pawn, but you have to have your bishop pair operating at maximum capacity. So pawn, we have bishop to d4, stopping bishop to b2, and now bishop to e4. Now if the knight moves, of course bishop to d5 is just a very nice idea. And how does Nepo proceed here? Pawn to g6. He wants to play f5, kick away the bishop, and then continue pushing his pawns in the center of the board. King to h1, sidestepping this diagonal and preparing to march that f pawn up the board. Bishop to c5, again offering a trade of bishops, and bishop to b2, again Nodirbek declines. And what's left to do? Of course, pawn to d5. Everything else has been, nicely prepared. The pieces are occupying optimal squares, and it is time to execute d5. Okay, c captures, knight captures, and now queen to g5. You do not want the queen there, staring at the barrel of the two rooks. Queen g5, and now knight back to f6, offering a trade of rooks. Rook captures on d7, we have rook captures, and bishop back to f3, controlling the knight. Bishop to d4, again offering a trade of bishops, but not even that. Even if the bishops get traded here, Nepo just gets the passed d pawn, and that's a game over. So instead, after bishop d4, bishop back to c1. Unfortunately, we have to leave this beautiful diagonal. Now pawn to e4. We have bishop to e2 and knight to d5, freeing up the this f file for the pawn, and it seems like you're inviting bishop to g4, but it doesn't really matter because f5 will be played. So bishop g4, pawn to f5, bishop back to e2, and now bishop to f6, chasing away the queen, queen to g3, and king to g7, improving the position of the king a little bit before continuing to push those pawns. We have pawn to a4, knight to c3 now, going after the bishop on e2, so bishop to c4, attacking the queen, and queen to e5, centralizing the queen and offering a queen trade. But of course Nodirbek cannot accept this. He's still down material, and his only chance lies in activating those bishops and maybe getting some sort of an attack against the black king. So bishop to f4, queen back to e7, and now pawn to h3. And here the position is winning for Nepo, but you have to find the correct idea, which will not be a problem if you just, tap into the spirit of the position and, just let go. You know what the move is. Feel free to pause the video and win the game for Nepo while I give you a couple of seconds. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations. You had 17 seconds to figure out this one, as Nepo has 17 seconds in this position. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, the move is, of course, pawn to b5. You can see that Nepo spent 0 seconds playing it, but that's because, of course, he prepared it well in advance. And the point is now the bishop has no squares, and you have to either resign or, as Magnus said, as you can see, the quote above the board is by Magnus, Jan is going to have a lot of frustrating moments because Nodirbek is so slippery. So let's see why Nodirbek is so slippery. A captures on b5, A captures, again trapping the bishop, but now look at this, rook to c1. Nodirbek finds a way out. Okay, how is this helping us? B captures on c4, rook captures on c3, but now what do you play here? It seems like, well, you can see what it seems like, but maybe there's something better. Once again, feel free to pause the video and try to find the cleanest way to win the game for Nepo while I give you a couple of seconds. This time you had 18 seconds, and hopefully you guys found it right away. For those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is rook to d3. Of course, not capturing the rook. If you capture the rook, you allow this check, and then when the king moves to a light square, you're going to capture this pawn, also with check, and then you just have a passed b pawn that's going to be pushed, the queening square already defended. This is sufficient counterplay for Nodirbek to achieve a draw. But Nepo says not so fast. Rook to d3, attacks the queen, attacks the rook, and this forces Nodirbek to capture, and this will grant Nepo a pass pawn on d3. We have rook captures on d3, and now you could capture with the either pawn. Nepo decides to play c captures on d3. The engine prefers e captures on d3, but both is fine in human terms. We have queen to e3, and now pawn to g5. Happily marching forward, bishop to h2, and pawn to f4, cutting off the bishop from entering the game. Queen to d2, and now queen to d7. We have bishop to g1, hoping to get f3 in to maybe free up the bishop somehow. Queen to c6. Now preparing queen to c2, so queen to a5, saying, okay, if you go queen to c2, I might have some tricks here to maybe get some sort of a perpetual against your king, but Nepo says, not so fast. Queen d6. I will keep my queen here and just continue pushing the pawn. So, okay, Nodirbek blocks back, queen to d2, queen to c5. Again, preparing queen to c2, and we have queen to a2. Again, saying, okay, you go down the board, I go up the board. And Nepo says, all right, now it's possible. Queen to c2, queen to a7 with check. We have king to g6 and queen to a8, trying to get some checks behind the back rank against the black king. Pawn to d2, we have queen to g8 with check, king to f5, queen captures on h7 with check, king to e5, and now queen to b7, preparing to further continue checking the black king, and Nepo just brings another queen into the game. We have queen to b5 with check, king to e6, and now queen to e8 with check. So can Nepo avoid all of these checks? We have bishop to e7, as they are both now below the 10-minute mark, basically playing on that 1 second increment. Queen to g6 with check, king d7, we have queen to f5 check, king to c7, queen to a5 with check, king to b7, we have queen to b5 with check, king to c8, and queen to e8 with check, sort of almost winning the bishop, but just bishop to d8. We have queen to e6 with check, queen goes back to d7, and now queen to a6 with check. We have king to b8, and now there are no more checks. So f3 here, f3 is a very, very sneaky move. If let's say, not Nepo, but let's say your uncle was playing this position with black, he might play something like queen to c8, offer a queen trade, and then all of a sudden queen to a7 is checkmate. So it's not out of the question, and you know, it has been done even in top level chess. But Nepo says, all right, I can see your bishop. I'm not like you know, some of agadmator's viewers. Pawn to e3, and he was in this position on move 68 that Nodirbek Abdusattorov resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So Nepo bounces back, he's back in the match, and then he wins 2 more games, and he wins the match. These were the final standings, 13-11. So it was very, very close, but it is Nepo who continues, and it will be Magnus versus Arjun in the next match, and the Nepo will face Hikaru Nakamura. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, you resign here because, well, there are no more tricks you can try. You can advance the b pawn because that's always good, but let's say queen to d1, and let's say b5, just e2, the a7 square is covered, so you can just continue advancing the pawn. Queen comes into the game, and once you push that pawn, I mean, queen g1 is checkmate. There is nothing to even try here. So yeah, Magnus said it well. Nepo had to really, you know, try very hard, as Nodirbek was very, very slippery in this game, as in all the other games. But in the end, Nepo prevailed, and like I said, he will face Hikaru to see who will have a chance of winning the Speed Chess Championship 2024. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Once again, big congratulations to those of you who were able to take down both pause the video moments. I would like to thank Meadow the Chess Dog, Vicky Hackney, Meadow the Super Chess Dog, Darren Little, and Jerry Drever for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions such as this one and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your Sunday.